Hello and welcome to Connect, Engage, Collaborate, a podcast brought to you by the Tempe Police Department. I'm your host, Patricia Ramirez, and today I'm joined by a panel of guests. Can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Rodney Collazo. I am the Business Systems Supervisor overseeing the Technology Services Unit for the department.
Can you tell me a little bit more about what that role is?
Absolutely. The Technology Service Unit, also known as the TSU, is responsible for pretty much all the in-car patrol technology that's available to the officers and some that are on their person. So body-worn camera equipment, the MDT, known as the mobile data terminal or laptop nowadays, in the car, and the PD applications that help support the officers with their day-to-day work. So that could be our CAD system, which is on a mini scale in order to support the officers while they're sitting there taking reports based on crimes or calls for service.
And before you came to the Tempe Police Department, can you explain a little bit of your prior experience, please?
Sure, absolutely. Prior to joining Tempe, which was in March of 2022, I was with the Glendale Police Department for 8.5 years. Before moving to Arizona, I was originally from New York. So I spent over 20 plus years in public safety, law enforcement, did some time in patrol in New York. I spent a great amount of time in radio communications, 911 dispatching. And then I transitioned over to technology and telecommunications, where I really kind of got to broaden my horizons and really understand the field that I'm currently in nowadays.
Great. Thank you. Welcome to our family as well. And Dell, if you could please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Dell Webb. I've been with the department for 18 years. I work in dispatch and communications. Right now, I'm the technical supervisor, so I oversee the technology for the Communications Bureau, and I work with Rodney and the officers that coordinates with that platform as well.
Were you yourself also a call taker or a dispatcher before your supervisory position?
Yeah, so I started with Tempe as a dispatcher. I did dispatching for 3 years, and then a supervisor position opened, and I tested for it and was selected. And then I supervised a squad for a couple years. And then I took over, we have a hiring and training unit for dispatch. And I took over that shortly after there and did that for 9 years, where I hired and trained dispatchers for 9 years. Went back to the floor for a year, and then I'm now in the technology position.
Can you tell me who are dispatchers and what do they do?
When you call 911, that's who you're getting as a dispatcher. So it's a lot of the unseen people. When you call, they answer the phone, they gather the information and have that information sent out to whatever resource needs to respond, whether that's going to be an officer for a crime or a paramedic or a fire truck, depending on what's going on.
What are the main reasons behind dispatchers asking the questions that they do when they call for help?
Yeah, so there's a lot of, we're trying to gather the information quickly because, the timeliness is important. Usually when people call, it's critical that they get help quickly. So our scope has been narrowed down to identify what information do we need to gather primarily in order to assess the situation to determine what kind of resources we need at the scene, and gather those resources to respond as well. We're asking questions because we're trying to paint a picture through words for the officers that are responding to the scene, so they can, as they're responding and the information is being relayed to them over the radio on the MDT, it kind of presents that picture so they can prepare themselves as they arrive on scene to deal with what's going to be happening. So it gives them that, real-time kind of play of what's happening and what kind of scene am I going to be arriving at.
With your work experience, can you also share on that same topic?
Yeah, I think as we call them, the voices that are in the dark or the unsung heroes, dispatchers, call takers all play a vital role in ensuring that they're getting the meat and potatoes, if you would, of what's really going on to better serve the officers that are responding. And I think that there's not enough credit that's given to a call taker or dispatcher because they're taking calls at a person's lowest time in their life, could be. If they're dealing with a tragic incident, a loved one is not breathing, a loved one has been injured or hurt to the point where they need medical emergency as quickly as possible. Serving as a public safety answering point, the police dispatcher is the first line. You can integrate the fire aspect in it, but the dispatchers and call takers have a large responsibility to make sure that they're relaying that pertinent information to those first line responders.
And you spoke about some of the challenges there of dispatch. How can we better support when you said not at times not supported as much? How could we better support?
This platform that we're in right now allows a virtual look into what a call taker or dispatcher must go through. So there's a level of training. There needs to be a level of understanding. A call taker and dispatcher, I would say, they have to be multi-talented, and they have to be good multitaskers. And I think when you look at it from the public standpoint, Trish, you see the officer and you see the paramedic or the firefighter arriving, but no one sees the dispatcher in the background. That's the person who essentially started getting you the resources that you need at a most critical point in your time of need. So I think that globally it's not looked at as a point of, who they are, but they are the unsung heroes in the background. Those voices are in the middle of the night when most people are sleeping. Those are the people that are there helping you, to get through your worst times.
Dell, from what he was just saying, can you help the listeners understand what the setup is in communications, and just so that we can have a better understanding of their world as well?
So our dispatch center, we have, we call them consoles or positions, but at the position we have a large monitor. We have the 55-inch monitor, and then we have 4 24-inch monitors on each side. So we have a big screen setup that we're looking at, that we're processing lots of information. The information we're processing, we have our CAD system. And in our CAD system, it has the CAD element, which is the actual program that we use to input the data, the information. With that, we have a status monitor that's kind of like a line-by-line view, visualization of what the officers are doing, and it presents information to us on what calls they're working on, what locations they're at. And we also have the mapping element that goes with it as well, that prevents a different visualization based upon a geographical map of what things are happening in the city, so we can tell geographically where units are, where incidents are occurring. We have our phone system, which is all digital. So when a phone call comes in with technology now these days, when I first started, somebody called 911. If you could not tell us where you were at, we could not find you. We had no technology to do that. In today's world, we have that technology that the phone call, the smartphones itself and the lines give us a location on a map, a fixed location where we know we can send help to if we can't communicate with that caller. Now, we also have text to 911, which is something that I don't know a lot of people are aware of, that in situations where they may not be able to verbally communicate with us, they can text 911. And here in Arizona, that'll hit any one of the PSAPs, public safety answering points, where they can get them help. Then our other side of the screen, we have our radio. So our radio to us looks different from an officer. It's a computer screen, and it's all digitized, and we have all our multiple channels. We have several channels that we can monitor, that we can work off of. We can communicate with officers on, other agencies. And then also we have a network computer that we do a lot of our resourcing on, either through the internet or through different platforms that connect to different systems where we gather information. We wear headsets. So anytime we're working, we're wearing a headset with a microphone, and that's how we're communicating either over the radio or by phone with the callers. Our positions do move up and down, so we can stand and move up our platform, or we can sit and move it down, so we can adjust it to accommodate different people and things like that. So the room we're in now is actually really nice. It's big. It has windows. Most comm centers are sometimes smaller, not a lot of window space. So it's pretty inviting, I think.
So just breaking down a little more of 911 in the desk, are you taking one call at a time? Are you taking many calls? Or tell me how that's handled.
Our employees are all trained to do both aspects, call taking and dispatching. So what that means for us is they're trained to do both. So every day they come into work, they might be assigned a different thing. They might be a dispatcher working a channel, or they might be answering phones, or even through the day it might change up. But for a call taker, the calls are fed automatically. So you log into the computer, you tell the position you're ready to take calls, And when a call comes in, the call feeds it based on the priority of the call. So we take 911 lines. We take also non-emergency, what we call admin lines, as well as different agencies that call us. And the system prioritizes those calls based upon how the call's coming in, and will deliver it on priority to the person. But it's one call at a time for a call taker. So they'll answer that call and they'll work with that call until it's either completed or resolved or finished. Most of our call takers, the process is for them to work that call. And as soon as they're done, the system gives them a 5-second wrap-up time, and they're going to be fed the next call. Here in Tempe, we take about 1,000 on average, 1,000 incoming phone calls a day.
And hearing that, so you shared that you did this in the past. And as you were just hearing Dell speak of that, what do you recall from your memory and the excitement, I'm sure, of that job?
Well, I think the 911 entire platform has grown, and technology has supported its growth. As Dell mentioned, a long time ago, you didn't have the ability to know where a person is. And now they have different applications that support based on your call from your cellular device, where we can rapidly see where you're calling from. So that's vital to an officer, right? And it's vital to the dispatcher who's trying to perform their function, is to get the resources to you as quickly as possible, and to understand what resources you actually need. Text to 911 has probably been one of the most major ways to enhance the ability to really tell a dispatcher or a call taker how much help you need without actually speaking a word. There are times when people don't have the ability to really communicate their need for law enforcement or for medical help. Domestic violence situations always are, they can become really raged to a point where you may not have that ability to really speak or feel comfortable enough to say something. And that text to 911 platform now offers those capabilities of being able to really describe what help you need and how fast you need it. So I think we've seen how technology has played such a major role in uplifting platforms that help not only law enforcement, but public safety entities as a whole take it to the next level. So I'm really excited to see where that goes, and as it continues to flourish.
And tell me, how essential is real-time information for officers on duty?
So real-time information is extremely helpful, and it provides real-time intelligence to officers to be able to help guide them to their call that they're seeing via their CAD screen, which we call an MDT, which is a computer-aided dispatch platform. So that call is generated in the 911 center, and it's fed to the officer on their laptop in their vehicle. That real-time intelligence helps them to understand where that crime is actually happening at to a great degree, because when you're looking at intelligence, you're getting it sometimes third-party, secondhand information. Having a real-time crime element allows someone to physically view what's being seen from the street level, and that's in collaboration, partnership with our transportation or traffic management center. So that element of being able to see real time what's in front of that person, to be able to provide that to the officer that's responding, that's huge. Back in the day, we didn't have that capability, and technology has helped elevate us to the point where now we can mitigate crimes, reduce that time, and provide that real-time critical awareness intelligence going forward.
So do you recall working, and this may apply to you as well, where a 911 call came in and we weren't able to tell where that person was at, and the difference with the real-time information? Have you ever worked such a stressful situation?
Early in my career, before we could tell where cell phones, and I received a call of I could hear loud music, but I could also hear somebody crying in the background. This is the time when we just had the phone number, and this went on and persisted for a great deal. But what I also could hear is, at a point, I could hear a violent altercation take place. Now, at that time, the best we could do was say, well, this cell phone tower is what's picking up the phone signal. But weren't able to provide precise location. And over the course of about 40 minutes with this phone call, of just putting out general information, a vehicle playing loud music, driving in this area, it actually was stopped in the West Valley, and they found a female that was in the trunk of the vehicle that he had taken from a party and had assaulted her. And so it was, that anytime you get a call, your role is to help people. And we take that, all our employees have that kind of ingrained in them. That's why they're there. And so that ability to help them when we're in situations where we don't have information or we don't have what we need to help somebody is very debilitating and frustrating. Our whole goal is to be there to help the public.
And as you reflect back to that memory, how do you even feel now as you're sharing that? Because that sounds like 40 minutes of stress for me.
It was. And it's, a lot of people envision that, every 911 call is something critical in nature. And while not every 911 call is, some of them become very routine in the job when you've been doing it a long time. There are certain instances that stand out that just, remind you of the importance and just kind of get ingrained in you as you go throughout your career. There's different times you'll pick up on things. One of the things that's challenging for dispatchers and call takers is they'll often hear the initial event, what happened, right? They'll be on the phone with the person. And once people arrive on scene, we're cut off from that and we move on to the next call. Yeah. We hang up the phone. If it's something really traumatic, obviously we're going to take care of our people and give them a break and stuff. But for the most part, you might take a violent domestic violence call, and then the next call you get is a noise complaint or somebody's vehicle parked illegally or things like that. So for us, it's just ongoing. You're just always in that rhythm and pace of on to the next thing.
Yeah, there's been too many cases where Dell and his team and his staff can tell you where, like you said, you come from a non-emergency call and then you're dealing with a possible shooting victim, or it could be something worse, where my first call on a Father's Day was, a mother woke up screaming because her husband came home the night before. He was unfortunately extremely intoxicated and just wasn't aware that their young child was in the bed. But like you said, a dispatcher has to take that information and separate the emotional side to be able to provide help and a resource to that caller. And then you hang up, you get all the resources there, you hang up. What are you left to do with that emotion now? So, I've seen where we've all grown as a society where the police departments around the world are doing a great job incorporating those after action reports with the dispatchers and the call takers, because you need to. There's no closure when you take calls like that. You're getting feedback from whether it is the patrol sergeant or the patrol lieutenant, and they're keeping you in the loop and abreast of what's going on. But that's a lot to take in. And 5 minutes later, you're off to your next call. So I think this performs that deep dive that not a lot of people have access to. So I think it's great for what we're doing. I think, Dell and his team are they're just phenomenal people too. So.
And I'm definitely hearing progress that in communications that we are making. So we have today the ability to know where a person is if they've called. But I think it's also important for the caller to provide the address as best as he or she can. But we do have some things to help us. And then we have the real-time crime information available that we didn't have. And today, which 20 years ago when I was an officer, we didn't have, we have drones. So can we speak about what are the main uses of drones and how beneficial are they
absolutely.
to us?
So I think the drone program itself is essential to any police department. When you incorporate a real-time crime center, a real-time intelligence center, and the drone program, you're getting all of this great intelligence being fed into one centralized location. And the purpose of that location is to not only provide that intelligence and that critical awareness to patrol the officers that are working or the boots on the ground, but it helps when detectives are working cases. Drones are now being widely used for large events. So as you know, the Super Bowl is going to be coming back to Arizona in February. We're not the host city, but there are events taking place where these drones are going to be vital to this public safety nature of everything. And it's going to be able to provide the officers intelligence of what's going on. So many times, Trish, where officers are responding to calls, they don't get that firsthand knowledge or that firsthand information, that view. And a real-time crime center can provide that intelligence because we can incorporate our partnerships with our traffic management center. We can incorporate partnerships with our local businesses and our private and public partners to be able to ingest data and to be able to supply that to the officers that are responding to that call for service or to that scene. And the aerial view that a drone offers nowadays is so essential. So not only to the crime in progress, but large scale events, like I was mentioned, and drones are being used right now to recreate vehicle accidents because detectives are responding and they're getting all information from patrol or the witnesses. But now a drone can be utilized to recreate the vehicle accident scene from a possible fatality or from a severe accident. So I'm super excited that Tempe has a drone program currently.
Okay.
And we have policy in places because like every law enforcement agency that's out there, we are regulated by the FAA. The FAA mandates laws of when to utilize drones. We currently have a great policy in place here that our executive team authorized and when it is allowed to use a drone. And again, public safety, far most important, because our essential goal is to provide that partnership with the community. So we're utilizing them for those specific purposes.
Do drones come into play for communications?
So when we're talking to somebody as a call taker, we're trying to elicit information from them. And sometimes communication can be hampered just by a person's ability to describe something. Sometimes that can be very challenging when you don't have that visual side of it to really get a visualization of what's going on. So the drone or any kind of real life footage gives us that ability to kind of scale out, and it helps the responding officers, even something as simple as a traffic accident. What approach does that officer need to take to put their vehicle that's going to help all the other traffic around it to be able to avoid that scene and things like that. So that's where that drones and cameras comes in to provide us that extra insight.
Yeah. Chula Vista Police Department, like I said, they started a drone as a first responder program. Saves time, Trish.
Oh, it's huge.
And it saves resources. A drone can respond from an alternative site and gets there faster than a patrol vehicle and can really determine what level of incident is taking place or the amount of resources we need to actually deploy to that location.
Well, thank you both for giving some insight in terms of communications, our equipment, what we use. Can we now move to discussing some success stories that we have had that have started off with communications with that 911 call coming in? I'm going to move it to Dell could you share a success story?
I was actually working as a supervisor, and as a supervisor, my job is to manage the floor, to be a resource for my employees, to provide guidance, direction. But when there's phone calls that need to be answered, I'll chime in and I'll answer a phone call. So there was a 911 call that had come in. All our operators were on the phone with other people, so I picked up the line, and it was a father that had pulled his 18-month-old son out of a pool, and that was a challenging call for me, because I had children at that same age, and the human side of you, but you push that back to the back of your mind, and you get the information, you send resources, you stay on the phone to support that person in their time of need. Fortunately, law enforcement arrived on scene first, took over CPR. Paramedics arrived, transported the child to the hospital. He was in critical condition, but he was able to pull through and came out. And from all indications that the child was going to be fine, was showing very good positive signs. So that's for me, was a huge positive side of the career. Sometimes they don't end up so well. I've had lots of coworkers that have been in similar situations where the child didn't pull through, and those can be very challenging.
Do you feel that you played an important role in that success story? I feel you did. So I'm just asking, do you feel that you did?
My first thought after I got off the phone was, did I do everything I could do to help ensure? And I'm sitting in a call center, answering the phone, but still, did I get an accurate location? Did I enter the information in time? Did I provide that insight to those people responding? At the time, I think I really diminished my role. But as I look back on it, that obviously that was hugely important. I had another personal situation where I had to call 911 earlier this year for my child that was in a situation where they needed immediate medical attention. And it's different being on the other end. Like, I didn't realize how I was probably not a good caller, but the call taker on the other end did a phenomenal job keeping me calm, asking those questions. And I was, from that standpoint of it, I was so grateful that those people are there in that room and they answered the phone, because that's what connected me with that resource, them answering the phone and getting that resource to my location. It brought it back to me that's how vital communications is we're that point where the public calls when they need help. And if we can't answer that phone for them or get to them, then they can't get the resource they need.
First line of defense, a lot of people think is, the first responder, the police officer, the paramedic. But that first line of defense is that brave call taker or that dispatcher who's essentially starting everything that you need to get everything going. And I think it's sometimes taken for granted. But I think that, there are some great men and women in this industry that do a phenomenal job. And I think that we could always use more people who are willing to dive into that field, because it's just not a job, it's a career. And you got to have a passion for
Absolutely.
it.
I would
So many people
100% agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So many people don't, it's hard, like Dell mentioned, to take yourself out of that human element when something like that personal to you. But by all means, I'm sure every police department in the world is looking for great people, and it starts there.
And tell me, Dell, explain what happens when you receive a call from a person suffering from a mental health crisis.
So currently in Tempe, and we've seen for a while that people will call in. So let me start with saying that obviously 911, a lot of people equate that with, that's what I call to get help. And for a while there, our biggest resource is police officers, or we have the firefighters and paramedics, but we really didn't have that outlet or that specialty where somebody dealing with a mental health crisis. Officers are trained in various use for law enforcement and things like that. So we have this partnership with mental health professionals. So when people call into us, again, and we identify a mental health crisis where there's no harm to the public, no laws being broken, we can connect that person with a crisis counselor that allows them to get the resources they need from that aspect, rather than from maybe a law enforcement aspect who might not have the resource that they need to get the care or the help they need for that situation. And that's huge for us, because we realize, sending an officer to this situation where a person's having a mental health crisis is not always the best resource, because the officer might be limited in their abilities or training or knowledge about, the care system that's going to be needed for this person, So having that resource here in Tempe I think it's been huge for us in the dispatch center, and I believe for officers as well, to free them up, to be able to be free for the things that they're needed for, and to provide the, appropriate resources to the public for that.
I'm just going to ask you to break that down a little more for us in terms of how do those resources help the call taker and the dispatcher and also the responding officer.
So mental health crises, again, could be, somebody dealing with a situation where something has happened in their life to where they don't have the ability or resource to cope with that, whether it's a death, a loss of a job, or, a number of things that could be going on to where they feel they are at their wits' end. They don't know where to turn to for help. They're truly despondent. And so those mental health resources, whether it's counselors or treatment programs that they can get involved in, we can now connect them with that starting point to where they can start those, have those resources be made available to them. Those people that can even respond out to the location to them, to assist them, to provide them, with, first of all, just that initial comfort, right? I'm here to listen. I'm here to hear what you have to say. And then we have ability, resources, other people, whatever it might be, to get you the help you need. From the officer standpoint, the same thing. I mean, most officers are trained to, deal with law enforcement, criminal code, things like that. Not to say we don't do community engagement. We do, but, if I'm an officer and I arrive on the scene to somebody that's, dealing with the grief of losing a loved one and needs some help through that, an officer probably is not going to know what the resources or the counselings that are available. So it relieves them of having to navigate this system, right, of who to call, who to get out here when we have that whole system in place.
So now we're down to an exciting part. The three of us are sitting here, and the three of us have been dispatchers. And I'm very proud personally of that work. And as I know the two of you are. So if a listener was wanting more info in terms of what are the qualifications needed to be a dispatcher or an analyst, can we talk about that?
Our qualifications are they have to be a high school graduate or equivalent. Typing is important for us. So they have the ability to be able to type about 45 words per minute, although our typing is a little bit different because we use a type of a code system. So it's not like looking at a book and copying it, but just the ability to have the familiarity with the keyboard is going to help out. Rodney's already talked about this multitasking, being able to switch quickly between different tasks. Obviously having a care for the community, right? Having that ability to be compassionate, to have that drive to want to serve your community. One of the things I'll touch on is, so we're 24 hours a day. Where I work, the building has never been vacant. It's always been occupied. Somebody's always there.
True.
And so you get assigned your work shift, and whether it's a day shift, a night shift, or a weekend shift, if those are your days you work, those are the days you work. And if a holiday falls on that day, you're working on that holiday. So a lot of times you have to, reprioritize maybe even things with your family. It sometimes can come at a great cost or sacrifice to do that job, even for dispatching, but law enforcement, public safety in general. So to have that, that desire to say, I want to be there to serve my community and be there to help them, and know that I'm going to probably have some sacrifice to my family, or at least have to work those events. Plenty of us we'll celebrate holidays on alternate days that might be different from our work days or things like that. But it is the thing I like about it. It's rewarding. I know I've been there several times where even if I don't get the acknowledgments, and most of our dispatchers and call takers don't need that, just knowing that they are there and the public calling in and we're able to help them is hugely rewarding. I think, understanding that you'll be working with some great people, and you're working with technology too. We do work with a lot of technology. When we first started, we had paper map books. So now we have, electronic digital maps and things like that. So being able to work with technology, and part of the things we talked about is the up and coming new technology that we're wanting to incorporating into the system. So,
Can I break that down a little more for a listener so that he or she doesn't feel, well, maybe this doesn't qualify me? Could we break down starting with age? Can you come into this field at age 22? Can you be 44 coming into this field? Can you discuss that?
Absolutely. The youngest person I've hired was 19. And they've been there for over 5 years now. They're phenomenal. And then we hire people that have even retired from other careers and come in and just want to do something different and a change. So yeah, we have, we have a spectrum of people from 19 all the way up into their, mid 50s that are working for our department now. So, obviously that's going to bring different dynamics. The
Sure.
younger person, my concern is do they have enough life skill to deal with the things they'll be exposed to? And then the older person, you don't have that worry. They've dealt with lots of things in their life and stuff. And so that usually was my initial concern, but the young people have been great at it, and their ability to adapt to technology is wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's always a concern, right? Because 19, 20, what kind of life experience do you have? And it's phenomenal to see how quick they can really change their mindset on putting themselves in a position with that caller to really understand what that person is going through and how they could be of help to them. So, and yeah, I mean, absolutely. We've hired different age groups, 36, 46,
And so you don't need specifically prior experience.
No, in fact, we will train. I mean, I had no experience whatsoever when I started. I had a coworker that's still with the agency that I knew of, that I came and watched what he did. And I was like, oh, that looks pretty interesting. It looked actually easy. It's a lot more challenging than it looks. And our training program can be pretty rigorous. It takes about a year to get a dispatcher fully trained when we hire them. But we have a great success rate as long as that person has that dedication. And, they're going to come into work one day and some days they're going to feel like, man, I just can't do this job. I remember having those days when I was in training thinking, I am not going to be able to do this job. This is too hard. And my trainers kept telling me, one day at a time, take it one day at a time. You're going to make mistakes, clear it, come back the next day with a clean slate. Let's start again. And then, it just starts to click where you're like, oh, okay, I get it. It's working now.
And Dell, speaking of communications, and so if a person was interested in this, what's the background? What's the limitation, if there is any limitation in terms of us hiring?
So that's a good thing about the call taking dispatching careers. There's really no one element that's going to fit more. If the person has the ability to type, I would say that is just probably the only thing I would say is if you know how to type on a keyboard, you can come in and we can work on training you how to do the job. Obviously, multitasking is helpful, but there's no one specific thing that I could say outside of being able to keyboard.
And it sounds like we push to support a person. And as you said, the next day you started again. And so we also push just that proper training.
Absolutely. One of the big things is we do a lot of work to get somebody hired, and that's a big investment for us. And for dispatch centers all across the country, staffing has always been a challenge. So we really invest and we work hard to try and make that person successful. And like I said, it's challenging, and we expect failures in training. And that's how a lot of people learn, is by, I made a mistake or something didn't go right, and then we learn from that. So there's a lot of patience involved in that. We use that in our training to help ensure we can, get them trained, to help them to be successful, because we want them to be a part of the team.
And on the side of an analyst, can you share with us the hiring and the training of an analyst?
Yep, sure. So the Tempe Police Department has a crime and intel center. That's where most of our intel specialists or tactical analysts work. You need to have a degree and some prior law enforcement experience to be able to navigate and work your way through and understand what your position is going to do that supports overall the department's mission of actionable intelligence. So yeah, we'll start there. and get it going. I think for the most part, our crime and intelligence center is made up of those two levels. We also have a police and data research, which deals more with the analytics portion, being able to pull CAD data and kind of get a visual look at how many calls for service an officer may take in a month, or where our crime trends are really happening. And the two work together. So the police research analysts and our CIC staff really do a good job of being able to provide an ultimate service to our law enforcement personnel that are out there working calls for service. So we're always hiring. And I'll follow the segue that Dell mentioned, www.tempe.gov. There should be a jobs link in there that if anyone's interested in learning more, you can feel free to do some research. But we are looking for passionate people that are interested in supporting the community. And I think if you start off there, it can only skyrocket from there.
So Dell, can you tell me what is the difference between a call taker and a dispatcher?
A call taker is their primary role is to answer calls from the public and disseminate what it is that's happening and how can I help? So in essence, a call will come in, 911 call, non-emergency call. They're going to ask questions from the caller to determine what's happening, where it's happening, and then elicit other information from the caller to kind of develop a picture based on what the event is. To provide adequate amount of information, they're going to put it into CAD, which is computer-aided dispatch. So in basics, it's a computer system that is a platform where all that data can be shared amongst all the other employees in the dispatch center, as well as the officers in the field. So they're going to generate that call. We call it a call for service by entering the location, what is the type of incident that it is, and some brief remarks explaining what is occurring, as well as asking if the caller wants to provide their information in case we have follow-up questions. On a call that's not in progress, they'll gather that information and they'll enter the call, and then it'll go over to the dispatch side. So the dispatcher monitors the radio channel, and they provide two main functions. Their first main function is to take those calls that are initiated by the call taker from the public and prioritize those calls, and then use their resources they have available and determine, which call is more priority to send. I need to send an officer to this call because this is happening now. It's a potential public safety issue, or this is a crime that occurred in the past. There's no danger or harm, so I can maybe hold on to that call for a little bit till I get some more officers available or resources available. So that's one side of it, the dispatcher. The other side is the officers are out there conducting their own activity. They might witness, they might be doing a detail or working a different, traffic control, or just their job is to go out and do traffic stops as our motor officers or whatever. So they're going to call into the dispatcher and tell the dispatcher, I've got a vehicle stop, or show me out with a person at this location. The dispatcher is going to initiate a call in CAD so that we can then track that officer's activity, where he's at, what he's doing. And then the dispatcher also provides the officer with information based upon, if there's a vehicle or a person involved and they want to check that person's credentials, find out if that person has a warrant or things like that. The dispatcher is going to provide that information to them in the field. So the officer will relay that over the radio. We'll check it in our computer. We'll relay it back to the radio to them in the field. In an in-progress incident, let's say an armed robbery were to occur, that call would come into a call taker. They would be gathering the information, and it's real time. So as soon as they formulate their response in typing it, so the caller provides the information, the call taker types it out and enters it into the CAD. That's immediately made available to the dispatcher, as well as any officer that's assigned to that incident. The dispatcher, so the only delay is the amount of time it takes the dispatcher to type the comment. And then once it's entered, anyone can see it. The dispatcher then verbally can relay that to officers that are responding in their vehicles while they're driving there, so they're not tasked with having to read it. We'll relay that information verbally to them as they're responding. The officer can also ask questions from the dispatcher to get from the caller, and the dispatcher will enter that into the call. The call taker will see it immediately as it's entered, and they can then query the caller to get a response on the question that is asked. So it's this flow of information.
And can you tell me, what does the dispatcher see? So does the screen for the dispatcher, are they holding calls? Is there just one call at a time? Is it a busy screen or something else?
Yeah, dispatchers do. So a call taker will work one call at a time, whereas a dispatcher is responsible for fielding multiple incidents and several officers that they'll be responsible for, and then managing that workload, prioritizing that. And it's ever changing because calls are constantly coming in from the public. Officers are constantly changing what they're doing, whether they're checking off the vehicles or clearing from other calls becoming available. So that dispatcher is kind of like the central hub, and their job is to take all that information and put it all together. So they've got several screens that they're watching and tracking, and then just working with those, to ever-changing priorities to, okay, they'll set out a mental, okay, so I have this call, that's going to be the one I dispatch when my next officer becomes available, and then something else might happen and it might change all that dynamic. So it's constant changing. And that's one of the things I really like about the job is, although there's a lot of routine things are always unique and different, and it keeps it, fresh, where you never know what you're going to get. Something's, always going to present itself to you. So that's the part I like about it, because there's a challenge to, always be working to be at your best game.
So Rodney, when the public thinks about drones, they automatically think of Big Brother. How do you respond to those concerns?
Yeah, and let me clear up the misconception that the public has. The police departments are just not flying drones just for the sake of flying drones. I would say that we have training environments that officers are going through that are FAA certified. They must pass a specific test in order to fly in unmanned aerial aircraft system. So they're doing that in a closed environment away from the public, in order to make sure that they stay up to date on their tactics on when they have to deploy a drone. But when we're deploying a drone, we're doing it for a matter of public safety. If an officer is working in armed robbery, or there's a case involving a possible shooting, an officer can quickly deploy a drone to get a bird's eye view of that scene. So if we're working a large incident, a scheduled event, and we need to get a direction of travel on the traffic on ingress and egress out of an event, we can help our traffic management center deploy a drone and give them a sense of how far traffic is backed up to that event. But we're working it based on the FAA laws and rules that are set in place by the Tempe Police Department. And there are governance that it's like that with every law enforcement agency. So it has to meet a level of criteria that reaches exigent circumstance for a matter of public safety. A drone, as I mentioned before, Trish, provides an aerial view. So many times an officer, if they're happen to be involved in the pursuit of a suspect, and that suspect hops a wall, now there's no vision, there's no view. So deploying a drone now gives an aerial view, where before in the past, an officer would climb the wall and could get hurt. That suspect may be waiting for them, maybe armed. Or in previous times, we'd deploy a canine and a canine would get hurt. Well, now the drone provides that essential resource to be able to capture everything that's going on in this view, in this area of interest. And it provides real-time intelligence to officers that are responding to not only respond to that crime, but to mitigate the risk to public safety. So I definitely want to make sure that the public's aware we're just not flying them because we want to.
Yes.
Maybe in our homes, are getting our taxes down, or maybe in a training environment. But when we're definitely deploying, it's a matter of public safety. It has to reach that level of threshold based upon our rules written in policy that allow us to fly.
It sounds as though we have a check and balance, which is what
absolutely.
we need.
You need
So
to have a checks
perfect.
and balance in the system. If not, then everybody would just think that the Big Brother's always watching, that concept. Yeah, we definitely want to mitigate that and let people understand is that when we're flying, it's because it has reached a level of concern for public safety, or if we're flying, it's because of pre-event details to give us a better view of really what's going on the ground.
Absolutely. In closing, I want to thank both of you for your time and for your passion, your encouragement. And for any listener, I would say to reach out and to make a difference in our community. So I thank you for this time.
Thank you, Trish.
Thank you, Trish.
You're welcome.